Decent Conversations, where we are all about having lives that work. And I'm your girl, Tabitha Mwai. Today, our topic of conversation is on Sexual Offences Act. And together with me are experts in this field, people who have been helping people in the area of sexual offences. And I will wish for them to introduce themselves, starting from my farthest right.
Hello everyone, my name is Maryliz Bigwa, a human rights defender, a black queer intersectional feminist, and I work with a specific bias on issues to do with children, women, and LGBTQ persons. And I'm happy to be here today so that we can explain the whole jargon on Sexual Offences Act and the implications on us as we carry out our day-to-day lives.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Kevin Mwangi. I am a human rights lawyer and I litigate and formulate policies that ensure that the realization of human rights in Kenya at the regional, national, county and international level.
Thank you, Kevin. And we have Salome Jerry, who is our sign language interpreter. So, going into the topic of Sexual Offences Act. When we talk of sexual offences, often people think of rape, and it's assumed like rape is the only kind of sexual offense. And even when you talk to people out there, there's little knowledge and understanding on what are sexual offences. Probably you can start by shedding light on what is the Sexual Offences Act in itself, and what are the sexual offences.
The Sexual Offences Act is an act of parliament that provides for sexual offences, because in law we say that you can never charge someone with a crime that is not prescribed in law. So the Sexual Offences Act comes to prescribe the sexual offences. So it provides for definitions, for prevention and protection of all persons from harm from unlawful sexual acts and connected purposes. So the most, when people mention Sexual Offences Act, the only one people know about is either rape or defilement. So people never really understand the whole act and what it talks about. And so I'll begin with the easy one that everybody is familiar with, and then I'll go into the rest of the offences defined. I'll deal with the ones that are popular because there's so many, it will need so much time to go through each and every offense. So the famous one is rape. So a person commits rape if he or she intentionally and unlawfully causes penetration with his or her genital organs. So I'll define later on what is intentional and what is unlawful. The second thing is the other person does not consent to the penetration. The third is the consent. The consent is obtained by force or by means of threat or intimidation. So for there to be rape, one, there has to be penetration of the private genitalia. Secondly, no consent has to be there, or if the consent is coerced or through intimidation. So when we say consent, there's this thing we say in Africa that if a woman says yes, it's a no. Right? Mm-hmm. I think we need to be alive to these issues for us to be able to deal with them. You hear in the streets people saying, when a woman says yes, it's a no. And when they say no, it's a yes. And so so you'll hear some people saying, alisema hapana, but so when we say an intentional and unlawful under the act, what that means is that obtaining the first thing is it can be either through false pretense of fraudulence, which means the consent is obtained falsely. This can be either a person makes you to believe that they are something that they are not. So you know you're meeting with Kevin, but then John is the one that you're meeting with. So there's no consent. The second part is let me begin by saying this. An act can be intentional or unlawful if it is committed in any coercive circumstance, under false pretenses or fraudulent means, or in respect of a person who is incapable of appreciating the act in which the causes the offense. So if your consent is coercive, I don't know if you understand what coercive is that I'm not freely giving my consent. I tell you, if you don't give it to me, I will do what? I will hit you.
I think maybe when we talk of coercion, there is also the conversation around mostly people say that most of the time when girls lose their virginity for the first time, it's kind of coercion, even if it's with a partner that they choose. Probably you can expound more on that.
Coercion is, let me give it as it's defined in the Sexual Offences Act. So coercion can happen in certain circumstances. One of them is use of force against the complainant or the person who's another person, or against property of the complainant. So if I use force, so that consent was not free. We together? And if I threaten their property, I say to people, if you don't have sex with me, I will go and break steal your car or break the windows of your car or something. Any threat against your property. The second is a threat of harm against the complainant. So the first is force, the second one is threats. So if force is used, if there's force to the person or their property, threats to them or their property, and the third is abuse of power or authority. This happens mostly in places of work. So someone who has authority, even in homes. This is where you hear young girls were raped by or defiled by their fathers. Someone in authority uses it, that power to inhibit from indicating, to inhibit the survivor from indicating his or her consent. So it is not, they use their power to force you to give that consent. I dealt with a case where a girl was being told by the mother, if you do not give that consent, your brother and your sisters will not get food at the end of the day. And this was the father, the stepfather at that time. And so that is where it falls in. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah. I think you've elaborated on coercion. Probably you can go to another kind of offense. Yeah.
So there is a defilement. I think I'll start with the easy ones, then go, there is defilement. So defilement is where we cause penetration with a child. So a child is someone under the age of 18. So we need to understand, rape is for people over the age of 18. Defilement is for people, for children. So people under the age of 18. So that is what we call defilement. And let me define what penetration is. Penetration is the partial or complete insertion of genital organs of a person into the genital organs of another person. So when a person inserts the genitalia into someone else, that is what is defined as penetration. Because I've gone somewhere where someone said that they were given oral sex. Was it rape? That is not rape. But now the Sexual Offences Act was amended to include the anus as part of a sexual organ, because men get raped as well, which is a fact that we do not seem to appreciate. There is a gang rape. So gang rape is what the gentleman was talking about. There were 2 gentlemen that were charged with gang rape. This is where more than one person rapes you.
Maybe let me just interject. You brought up the issue of gynecologists. I think we've had cases where women were complaining they're being taken advantage of when they go to see gynecologists, and I think there's now a provision where if the gynecologist is male, at least you need to ask for a chaperone to be inside the room and a lady. So maybe you can expound on that so that as a way of protecting yourself, because at the end of the day, women will still go to gynecologists. And we've seen so many cases, especially of quack and fake gynecologists posing so that they take advantage of women.
In Kenya, we have what you call the patient charter. And for you, you have to consent for the doctor to see you and for the examination to be done on you. So if you feel you're not comfortable at any point of that examination, consent can be given and can be withdrawn at any point. I forgot to say that when I was defining consent. So it can be given and withdrawn at any point. So for example, if, let me just finish with that. So if you're not comfortable, you have the right to request for an alternative doctor or someone else to come and examine you, or someone else to be in the room. Then we have what is called attempted rape. This is where someone attempts to rape you. I believe we understand what rape is. So they attempt to cause penetration by using the genitalia. I believe you're familiar with that. And then there's indecent acts. This is where any contact between any part of the body of a person with the genital organs, breast or buttocks of another, but does not include any act that causes penetration. So it's just touching of your genitalia or any part of the body. So if someone comes and places their buttocks on your chest or something without your consent, that is indecent act. And this also, the second part of it talks about showing pornography to children. So exposing or displaying any pornographic material to any person against his or her will. So it's not even children, it covers everyone, his or her will. So when you show someone pornography without his or her consent, this will be considered an indecent act.
I would like us to take a short break, then we will be right back. Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is Decent Conversations and we're talking about the Sexual Offences Act. So earlier, Kevin has really expounded on the different types and forms of sexual offences. They are like the most common that we face in the community and even in public spaces. Probably I would want Mary Liz to just go on and tell us, are there other kinds of offences that are not included in the law?
Not that they're not included on the law, but the law is very deliberate in separating the Sexual Offences Act, especially between adults and children. Why it is particular? Because all of them are punishable, yes, but when it comes to children, of course, it becomes more severe because then one of the most important things about consent is that a person who is not up to 18 years old cannot legally give consent for sex. And that said, it means, of course, the law becomes more stricter when it comes to children, because for the better part of children who go through defilement, they cannot consent, and most of the time they can hardly report, because as Kevin explained earlier, for when it comes to things like rape and defilement, there's normally no room for consent most of the time, and for children it's even worse. And when we look at levels of coercion when it comes to consent, It's when you now have things like a person who is in a position of authority. Doesn't necessarily have to be in a workplace. It could be an adult who takes a person who is not up to 18 out and buys them drink, and then they get them drunk, and then after that they go ahead and have sex with them. That would be termed as defilement, of course, but of course the consent there was coerced, because then when you're drunk, of course you're not in the best position to make sober judgment to whatever it is that you're being put through. Another thing is that we have, and for how it has manifested mostly in communities and society, is that you realize with children, most of them are victims of defilement in spaces that are their home spaces. So it becomes hard for them to be able to report this, because of course when it comes to perpetrators of rape and defilement, the most important thing that they do is to threaten the victim. And when a victim is a child, it becomes worse. And then there's a culture around families and societies where there's need to protect a family name more than to protect their child. So it even when the family is aware of what is happening to the child, you realize either they will not take action, or most of the time it's even the people who live with the children that are making the children subject to defilement and rape and all that kind of stuff. And so it's very fundamental to note that when it comes to children, the laws become more severe. And I like that Kevin said at the end is when he's gonna give a detailed information of what are the repercussions when, say for instance, you involve a child in things like sex tourism, where we have people coming from different parts of the world, and they're having sex with children, or children are being trafficked to different parts of the world for the purposes of having sex. Or when we have incidences where, other than sex tourism, we're having it's like a home setting, and the mother brings people into the house. The assumption is that the people are coming to the mother, but the child is being subjected to all that. And what also it would entail, if for instance, as Mary Liz, I knew there was a child who was being put under that, or I paid someone money to sleep with the child, for instance, and what that would look like for me, even if I was not maybe the perpetrator, I enabled the situation. Another thing that I'd like to speak about is when it comes to penetration, most of the time then people would ask, can a woman or someone who identifies as any of the spectrum within the female identifying genders, can they rape a person? And I've had many people being conflicted about that, and yes, both a man and a woman, or anyone within the fluidity of gender, can be a rapist, because for there to be penetration, there has to be insertion and being inserted. So if a woman is coercing a man into having sex with them, that is definitely rape within the confines. If it's a person who is underage, it's defilement. Then we have all the spectrums up to pedophilia, up to all of those. And women can be rapists. It is important when it comes to things like consent. When you're asking for someone age, you don't just ask how old are you, and then they tell you I'm 20, and then you go ahead and do everything, because the law again is very deliberate when it comes to zeroing in on, did you even care to know if the person is 18-year-old, and if you did care to know, the person tell you the right information? Because best believe, even as a victim of rape, defilement, and all the possible sex offenses, sexual offenses, if the court realizes that your perpetrator asked for your age, for instance, and you told them a lie, you'll be liable for that. You're going to be jailed for that because you lied. Because when you're underage, but you lied about your age, then that's a crime you've committed. And that would mean you'll get your sentence as well. He will get his sentence for maybe, because if he did coerce you, if you consented by lying about your age, then the crime might as well lie on your shoulders. So that is very fundamental to note in terms of how a person can give consent and how a person cannot give consent. And then we have it distributed when it comes to children as well, where when you define a child that is below 10 years, there are circumstances. When you define a child between 10 years and 15 years, we have different circumstances. And when you define a child between 15 and 18, there are different circumstances.
A suggestion to lower the consent age. So how are we dealing with these instances where it's two people who are below 18? Because they both can't consent. So probably you can comment on that.
Again, our society has been a problem for so long, and that is something that we need to be honest about. I feel like one of the reasons why it has become even a subject where people are now saying we have a lot of young boys in prison because they're being imprisoned for having sex with fellow young people and all that kind of stuff is because we are not honest about the whole subject of sex. We are not honest, we feel like it's a taboo to speak about sex. We feel like if I'm going to speak about sex as a parent, I cannot, the teacher should do the work and all that kind of stuff. We are forgetting a child begins to develop at the age of 8. When a child gets to 8 years old, they begin to develop sexually. A child could start, if it's a girl, they could start getting their monthly cycles at 8. If it's a boy, their voice can start breaking from 8. They can start seeing wet dreams at 8. All these things can start from 8. What that means then is that it means they need to begin to access information about sex, including the implications of how they react to those things. Because for instance, if we have honest conversations about this, then we'll make these people understand, these young people understand that you'll feel all these things. For a girl, you start developing, you start having breasts, your hormones will start reacting a certain type of way to touch, to all that kind of stuff. What then are you supposed to do about that? But we're not even honest to say the word sex with our children in the house. And that's where the problem begins. And it's very fundamental that we have that conversation, because then you make these below 18-year-old children understand that while wanting to have sex is a thing, both of them are not in the age to consent.
Before we go to looking at the penalties, probably you can talk a bit about victim shaming and blaming, because most of the time victims of sexual offences are blamed. And you'll hear some ladies being told you were dressed in a certain way, that's why this happened to you, why were you walking late at night, why did you go to that man's house, because it all goes back a bit to consent, but still, as you've mentioned, the circumstances surrounding consent, how can you educate people on blaming the victim?
I'll give my views and then she'll give her views.
Okay.
So for me, right now it's more shameful to be raped than to be the rapist.
Sure.
Because I've dealt with cases where you go to the police station, they ask you what you just said. What were you dressed? Why were you walking at that time? So it turns to be your fault because you were living your life. And it's not the rapist's fault because they raped you. If you're a man and you go, you were raped, they ask you, how can are you a man?
Exactly.
Then they assume you're gay, or they make so many assumptions as to why you were raped. So for me, I'd say, and that creates the barrier for people accessing justice.
Yeah.
Because when you're raped, the first point of contact is the policeman. And so if the UN did a study and said that 70% of cases end at the police station. Because when you reach there, you're victim shamed, that you just do not see what's the point of me moving forward. Yeah, so for me, that's my opinion.
For me, my opinion about victim blaming and shaming is, first of all, the society. The society has a culture of defending perpetrators, where when something like this happens, everyone wants answers from the victim, no one wants answers from the perpetrator. Which, according to how the law works, the reason there is a law is so that when something has happened, the victim should not be questioned before the perpetrator is questioned. So that's why there's a court case and the person you're reporting is taken to court or wherever, and then according to how it goes, then there's apprehension and all that kind of stuff. But the society is cultured differently. And the reason it's cultured like that is because we've been made to believe that the family is the most, well, it could be, I don't even know what term to use for it. It could be the most important setting of socialization, but because we've been made to believe that, then we deviate from being human, from understanding things like abuse and all that kind of stuff, because we feel like someone has a right to abuse me because they're my family. Someone has a right, if your family calls you things, if your family does not trust you. Nobody believes victims. And the problem with believing victims is that before it even spills over into the public, it's the family, it's the people who are close to you that do not believe you. Because most of the time, even before it gets to the police, where police harass you, and there are many reports that have been released where we have rape victims who have been double rape victims because they go to police station and they're raped again, just for reporting. We have women who have left their houses after being abused, and when they go to report, the police tell them, but it's the work of your husband to have sex with you, so why are you reporting? And there's marital rape there, but nobody would want to address that. There's a case where, and I'm always tempted to use my personal story as an example, where as a rape survivor, as a defilement survivor myself, at the age of 10, the first person I ever talked to was my mom. And the most weirdest part about that setting is that when I told my mom, first of all, because of how the social setting is, could not do much without my dad's decision. And then my dad's first instinct was definitely to protect the family name. Nobody needed to hear it because it was a family member who did it. And so they went and sat. And at every stage of all this, from the time I told my mom, I was no longer involved. I was a child. I shouldn't be told anything, I shouldn't hear anything, I shouldn't say anything, I shouldn't comment about this, I shouldn't talk about the whole incident. It's the adults who apparently know everything that should sit and talk about everything, should make decisions on your behalf, even when all the decisions that were made were not necessarily to my benefit or to seek justice for me and all that kind of stuff. And even after that, I'll tell you for a fact, until today, there has not been a day, apart from once, sometime last year, that I attempted to have that conversation with my mom, and even when I was attempting to have it, she wouldn't have it. She wouldn't want to have that conversation because it's shameful. And you see, the problem with that is that it's not shameful, it's not only shameful to them as a family, it's shameful even to me, so I shouldn't talk about it. If I talk about it, they probably would want to associate themselves with me because I'm shaming them in the process. And that shame is so deeply rooted that it becomes hard for the perpetrator to be apprehended or to be reported or for anything to be done to the perpetrator. And I feel like when it comes to victim shaming and blaming, a lot needs to be done in terms of believing victim. I always say I'm better off realizing a victim lied than realizing I actually was believing a perpetrator. Because when I believe a victim and they end up lying, to correct that is when you don't believe a victim, you see, when someone is raped and you do not believe them, you're actually telling the perpetrator it's okay to go on. And that's why the history of perpetrators is that they keep on doing it and doing it and doing it again. They don't do it and do it again because they want to. I don't want to say if they want to or not, because I have never been a perpetrator, but the society enables them to keep doing it, because the minute you do not believe a victim, what makes you think you'll believe the next victim they victimize, or the next, or the next? And so we have a tendency of perpetrators being people who just keep on doing it and doing it and doing it. And the reason is because for as long as you have allies, you see, in any kind of setting, if you have people who support you, then whatever it is you're doing is going to succeed. And so even if it's a perpetrator, for as long as they have people who believe in them, then that means there's no way that they're going to feel too comfortable at the expense of the victim. So for me, I'd say, let's believe victims.
Kevin, I want you to talk a bit on the penalties and even on the pros and cons of the act, because at least because most of the time we know it's an offense, but we don't know what you're getting into, and sometimes we are not looking at what is coming ahead. And when somebody gets taken, when someone gets taken to court, they start saying that that's too harsh. You know, what happens to the people I'm fending for? I'm a family man, or I'm a woman who has people depending on me. So probably make people aware of the penalties, the implications of getting into these offenses.
So you realize that the Sexual Offences Act prescribes minimum sentences for most of the offences. But as of last week, there's a judgment that said that prescribing minimum offences is unconstitutional because it takes away the autonomy of the judge to consider mitigating factors. Like what you say, I have a family. So those take away the autonomy of the judge, which is unconstitutional and it violates your right to a fair trial. So as of last week, right now the judge has the final say on how many years you go.
So the ones that were stipulated no longer apply?
Actually, that case was on the Sexual Offences Act. It was about a guy who had defiled, and so he was given 15 years. Then he appealed on the same, and then the judge said that the Sexual Offences Act has got penal provisions that give minimum sentences, but does not allow the judge to consider mitigating factors when sentencing. So that was unconstitutional. Yes, it has gone beyond the Sexual Offences Act. It is now even in the death penalty. Mandatory death penalty has been considered unconstitutional. It is where it emanated, in fact. So right now, minimum sentences are unconstitutional in Kenya.
Interesting perspective. So now, what happens? What happens when someone presents a case?
The judge has the final say. The judge will decide the sentence. So consider all factors, the mitigating factors, what happened. Yes. God forbid, raped or defiled. For me, you can either start at the police station or start at the hospital. But for me, and I preach this is something I believe in conviction, go to the hospital first. Because you will also realize a P3 form is an inadequate form. Currently, we are championing with Kizi Shako to have the P3 form revised. Because medical doctors have to write medical notes on the site. It's a very inadequate form. So the PRC for post-rape care form is what is very comprehensive. So for me, I advocate you start at the hospital. At the hospital, you'll be given emergency contraceptive if you're a woman. You'll be given the PrEP, post-exposure prophylaxis. You'll be given the one for STI. It's called there's one you'll be given to prevent STI. And then, you can receive physical, medical examination because it's a very, rape is forceful. So you need injuries and all those. So you have the post-rape care form, which is detailed. It even shows parts of the body which are being examined before it does not.
Actually had a sample to show so that people understand what goes into the form.
Yeah. And so once that is done, and let me say, also a rape survivor, in case the P2 does not work, or rather the emergency contraceptives, you have the right to access safe abortion, which is something people don't realize. And there's even a court judgment to the same. So you can't go to a hospital and say you've been raped and you can access. And it is none of the doctor's business to find out whether it's true or not. As long as you walk in there and say that you've been raped, you have the right to get that. The doctor is not a policeman. And we say we work on when rights are competing, we work on the one. So what would be more harmful? For you to get that child, or for him to conduct the abortion and find out it was a lie, which is what is more harmful. It's getting the child, which you do not want.
Yes.
I can see people nodding, but it is so traumatizing. I have seen people bear children because their parents say you cannot remove it.
Yes.
And that children's life is a living hell. And at the end of the day, it's not my decision to make. It's not your decision to make. It is the survivor's decision to make at the end of the day. And let's not take the rights from the survivor.
Okay. I think it's a heated conversation.
So when you're finished with the BRC form, then you can go to the police. And the reason why, like in Nairobi, they're now saying the clinical officers can fill the forms. But then we have Kizisha, who's a police surgeon, who sees over 300 clients a day. So she can see you after 3 months. And by the time, they say the vagina is like your tongue. You bite it, within a week it's healed. So if Kizisha sees you after 1 week, she'll write what she says. I don't see any tears, I don't see. So the PRC form makes sure that the doctor saw you and wrote what exactly.
I think also you should mention like it should be as soon as possible.
Yes, it should be as soon as possible. Don't shower. Don't shower.
Those are some of the things I wanted to say. Of course, one, believe the victim. You see why it's important to believe the victim, because you can only pursue those channels if you believe. And then of course, you shouldn't shower, and I know it's really disgusting. It's disgusting, even until today, whenever I think about it, it's disgusting. But the first thing you're supposed to not do is to not shower. Go with your clothes, because like he said, we don't have a forensic whatever. To do a DNA is expensive, but to know the blood type on your clothes, for instance, is very easy. And if there is blood, it becomes easy to know the blood type there versus the blood type of the person you've accused as the perpetrator. Then if it matches, people can take it from that. That is part of evidence. But if you've not gone with the clothes on, or you've not carried them to where you're reporting, then it becomes one of the reasons it becomes hard to pursue. The second thing is, when you're carrying those clothes, carry them in any bag that is either paper or cloth, but never polythene, because then the polythene will sweat. When it sweats, it will tamper with whatever DNA evidence that is in that cloth, so it becomes null and void when you get there. And then of course, in going to the hospital, which is what I also advocate for, because then one of the biggest problems we have, rape cases not being solved, is because when you start with the police, first you have to wait that long to see the guy who is in charge of P3 forms and whatever. And you can't get it, like P3 form is not a form you get it from any random person. Like there has to be a specific person who gives it to you. And so that's saying it means you cannot stay longer. Again, like he said, a vagina or any sexual organ heals really fast. And that's saying it means if you do not utilize the most important hours of the first 48 hours to 72 hours, but you are encouraged to work with the 48 hours, because those are the hours in which you can get as much evidence as possible for that. And then from there on out, then you can go to the police, because then it becomes hard for the police not to give you an OB number if you have the forms from the hospital. But when you don't have the forms and you're waiting for the P3 form, sometimes you may not get the OB number, and then by the time you're getting it, maybe 3 months later, what will you prove? Then it will become a battle, because the lawyer must always make money. The people who are involved must always make money. It will be a back and forth thing with promises. It will be fine, it will be solved, but nothing will happen. So it's from the very second something happens, and let's be each other's keeper. When your friend is telling you they suspect something, I always, like for me, how I talk to people, even when a friend of mine was the other day posting on Facebook how someone has been calling them all the time and telling them, you refused me and I wanted to spoil you and all that kind of stuff. And this person would constantly call this person, and I told her, go to the police and report, so that you get an OB number, because you never know, maybe this person is watching you all the time. Please, let's believe victims. That's like literally in all this panel, I only came to say believe the victim. It does not matter, just believe the victim. Until a time you feel like there's enough proof and you can't believe them anymore, just believe them. For that purpose alone, believe them. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if you have like something, a final remark you can mention. I think there are hotlines that people can call when they are raped or abused. You can mention that as you give your final remarks.
The only hotline that I'll give is the child helpline. Because again, I said I have a special bias for children, and I feel like as a society we all should endeavor to just become voices for children, because we've created a culture of taking children's voices away. So let's then try and be that reasonable voice in their lives. And there's a toll-free number you can call. It's 116. It's not a hard number, and every time you call, someone will be out to come and help you. They'll tell them where you are. When you're calling, I know most of the time you're panicking because you don't know what to do, but it's advisable unless you're the victim. And I feel like if you call this number, even if you're an adult, you still get some help coming your way. But it's mostly for children, and call it, it's toll free, you don't get to be charged anything, you have no worry whether your phone has money or not, as long as you have a phone. Call it, let someone come and offer help to you. Then organizations, be in contact with organizations. I can't in the very least begin to mention a lot of organizations. Even Decent Conversations is one of the organizations that you can actually keep a contact with one or two people there, and if something like this happens, call them.
Thank you. Kevin, any concluding remarks?
For me, I'd say people look at the law to change so much. Like today I came to talk about the sexual offences. There's a law, but there's a social issue which the law can never solve unless we wake up and realize that this is not a legal issue, it's a social issue. Because we are reacting to it, not preventing it. So we need to understand, and this is a gender issue. Gender is what we have prescribed is a man's duty and what is a woman's duty. So I was in Homa Bay, I think last year, and a young man told me, why shouldn't I rape a woman who has refused my advances? Because we have taught this man
Get whatever they want.
exactly. You cannot be rejected as a man. So we need to understand where did the ring start beating? Because sexual violence has now, even this Chief Justice mentioned it, it's now clogging our courts so much, and the conversation needs to change. Because I've worked on a lot of human rights issues, but the most degrading human rights violation I've ever seen in my life is rape. It really traumatizes you.
I think it's because you live with it forever.
Yes. And people ignore the psychological aspect of it. So we need also to realize that when you're violated, there's a psychological aspect of it. So where I work at the Independent Medical Legal Unit. And for us, once you're violated, we have medical providers in 43 counties, we have counselors in 43 counties, we have lawyers in 43 counties. So we ensure that you're able to get medical, psychological, and legal services. And we're able to take your case and take it to court. So we ensure that we rehabilitate you and then get you justice and redress at the end of the day.
Thank you. I think I don't have anything to add to this conversation. Like you brought all of it together. It's not only about the law, it's a social issue. We need to listen to the victims, and we need to be our sisters and brothers' keeper. Let's not watch as people are being defined or assaulted or even raped and keep quiet and blame them for an evil that is happening to them. Thank you so much, Mary-Liz, for making time to be here. Thank you so much, Kevin, for coming. Thank you so much, Salome. It's been a very in-depth conversation. This has been a set conversation where we are all about having lives at work. Our conversation has been on the Sexual Offences Act. Reach out to us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Decent Conversation. You can also watch us on YouTube, and you can also check out our blog. Bye-bye.